Welcome back, and thank you for joining me for another episode in the worm area. It's your nerdy suburban farmer, and thanks for joining. Updating my regular totes first. Again, these are the totes that usually have a lid with a tray at the top, but these totes I've been having issues with in terms of the moisture content, so I only have them covered with either a mosquito netting or a cheesecloth. So on the aluminum foil there, I had a couple of worms that were hanging out, which I'm going to remove from the aluminum foil. I don't want to constantly use this if I'm not really marking where the food is. These castings, as I mentioned, I was having an issue with throughout the summer with the amount of water that the castings were holding. Now, it could be due to the fact that these castings are a little bit older, but I'm not going to put the lid on since I do intend on harvesting the castings. But the worms look good, the castings look good. They just have a little bit more moisture still than what I prefer. So I'm just going to put some bananas. Bananas are really good because they can stay in the bin for a long time, and it takes the worms a while to break them down, and they do enjoy it. But I'm not going to add much else this week before I add the grit and put the bubble wrap back on it and finish it up. Now over to my second regular tote. Now on this one, there were a lot of worms that were on the bubble wrap. There's some, but there wasn't as many as the other one. And taking a look from this angle at the castings, you can see where the outside edges of this one was drier than where the bubble wrap was, which is what I'd rather see than just see it all really, really wet. I want to see that it is drying out a bit because I will be harvesting these soon. But there's a nice size worm ball, and the worms still look very happy, and they don't look stressed. I don't notice that I'm losing any numbers, even though I haven't been looking for any cocoons lately. But in mixing up these castings, the same thing as the other bin. The castings are a really rich, deep color. They are good quality, and I know that I'm going to be harvesting these soon. So I'm going to prep the bin the same way as I prepped the previous bin by just putting a little bit of banana in here to hold them over for maybe a week or two. And just some grit. No other fresh food is going to be added to this bin this week. Moving on to the first Vermi bag tote. Now with this one, again from the top view, you can see that the edges are dry. And I'm more concerned with the edges being dry in the Vermi bag totes than in the regular totes because these have a tendency to dry out very quickly. And I know I've mentioned it before and I keep mentioning it. I had a worm colony collapse last year, so I'm very careful and will be monitoring this bin to see if I need to add any water to it from my sprayer. But as I'm sifting through the castings with this one, there is a lot of food left over from the previous week. Still a bunch of apples, of course a bunch of sprouts. So I'm keeping that in mind as I'm feeding this particular bin because I don't want to overfeed any of my bins. So with this one, I am going to give it some fruit, some banana peels, but I'm just going to spread it over the top. It's got some purple sweet potato there. I'm just going to spread it over the top because, again, since these were recently harvested and restarted, I do want to increase the amount of castings in there and the amount of material that the worms need to go through. So I'm going to give a little bit more food and put some cardboard on the top to raise the content level, and then monitor this for the level of moisture in it. And for the second Vermi bag tote, in checking out this one, when I removed the bubble wrap again, I always have worms, and I always like to look at the worms just to see if they look distressed, if there's a whole bunch that are trying to escape. But after removing it, same thing as the sister bin, there's a lot of food that still hadn't been broken down, and then the edges seemed like they were drier in this one. So both need to be monitored for moisture content, but for a different reason from the regular totes. And here's another view of a huge worm ball right near the food. And as always, I fluff up the material just to make sure that I bring the material from the bottom, which can have more water in it, up to the top to kind of even and balance out the bin. Here's another good view of another worm ball in the bin. And this bin's conditions are the same as its sister bin. So I'm going to feed it the exact same way. I'm going to give it some banana peels, which last longer since there was food that was already in here. Add the grit, and then as well, since these were recently restarted, I'm going to add cardboard to increase the amount of material that the worms have access to, all while keeping an eye on the moisture content, because I do not want these to dry out. And here in New Jersey in the winter, I have more of a chance for my bins to dry out, so I want to keep an eye on that. And lastly, the final Vermi bag mini. So with this one, the worms, again, quite a few at the top, but not too many that I would be concerned that they're trying to escape their environment for any reason. From the top view, you can see that the only area on the top that was dry is where the bubble wrap was. But just under the surface, the material is still quite a bit damp. So I know that the moisture content is okay. It's slightly on the edge where I don't like it, where it's clumpy, but there's still quite a bit of food towards the top. The worms are still towards the top. So everything looks okay in this bin. So for this bin, I am going to give it a slightly larger feeding than I would normally, just because I'm testing the limits of this bin to see if the moisture will come out through the bottom. So there's a lot of banana, a lot of squash, and a lot of the sweet potato peel in this one, just to see what happens next week with the consistency. And I'm not going to add cardboard to this. I want to just let the moisture build just to see what happens and how the worms handle that. So once I mix this in, I'm going to put the bubble wrap on it, and I'm going to open it up this week because the top was really dried out. And that completes the update on all of my bins. I hope you've enjoyed the content and will join me on the next one. Thanks for watching.